Welcome everybody. I hope you're having a nice day of learning. So I've chosen this story which has the main topic of the story is the tension, the rivalry between Israel and the diaspora. I think an issue that David Hartman dealt with significantly, the relationship between Israel and diaspora. Here you'll see a tension. We'll try to unfold that and see what we can learn about it and see is it similar to what we have today? Is it not similar? Should there be a rivalry? What kind of rivalry? What kind of a relationship and so on? All these questions. Michael Walzer before actually advocated for some creative rivalry tension between Israel and diaspora that would foster creativity, that would try, to challenge each community to sort of to greatness, he said. So we'll see that in this text, and also within this text there's another way to or another angle to this story, which is how the Beit Midrash functioned in ancient times, in Talmudic times, either in Palestine or in Babylon. How the Beit Midrash was set up, and also, of course, since David Hartman set up a Beit Midrash in Yerushalayim, that functions quite differently from what we will see here. What can we learn from this text about what a Beit Midrash should be or should not be? And so let's go right into the text. What I would like to do is I will read in Aramaic, read the translation. We'll get through the text, I will make some comments for us to understand the basic plot of the story. And then we're going to go back and just reflect on the story, see what meaning we can make out of it, and I would like to invite you to participate. So this is a story appears in the Talmud Bava Kamma. So the first thing is, you have to know this was written in Babylonia. Apparently the story is written several hundred years after it portrays to take place. It's not, the writing of the story is not contemporary with the story, or it's not immediately after the story. So this is sort of a later reflection, okay, on this story. We don't know whether the story is true or not, but there's reason to believe there's some sort of kernel of truth in here. In any case, the story begins, there was a certain man who wanted to reveal another man's straw to the authorities. So the story here starts with a certain man, just an anonymous person, who wanted to reveal the straw that another man, another Jew, possessed, that he was probably hiding from the authorities, or that he was not declaring to the tax authorities. This was property that needed to be disclosed in order to be taxed. So this Jewish person was concealing this straw, and another member of the community wanted to reveal it to the authorities. Ataleka made a Rav. He went in front of Rav. Rav was the greatest authority, the greatest rabbi in his time. He was the head of the Academy of Surah. We're talking at the beginning of the 3rd century. Rav lived around the time of the completion of the Mishnah in the land of Israel, around the year 200. Do you know who compiled the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the compiler of the Mishnah. The Mishnah then became a text that was the subject of study. And so Rav was one of individuals who took the Mishnah that was completed in Israel and brought it to the academies of Babylon. Okay, so he took the Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and brought it to Babylon, brought it to his academy in Sur and to other academies. He was a very big personality. So this man who wanted to reveal the straw of this other guy, Atale Kamei de Rav, he came in front of Rav, Amar Lei, La Tachve ve La Tachve. Rav said to him, you can't do that. You can't reveal this guy's straw to the authorities. He retorted, Amar Lei, Machveina, Machveina. I am going to do it nonetheless. Well, Yativ Rav Kahana Kamei de Rav. Rav Kahana was a student of Rav. And Rav Kahana was sitting before Rav. He got up. Shamte lekoe mine. He stood up and he tore the windpipe of this man. Okay? This, what we call this this man?
A narc.
A narc? Okay. Okay, right. Okay. So whistleblower.
That's the one I was trying to think of.
So this whistleblower today has positive connotations, right? But here he's a moser. Moser in Hebrew is somebody who delivers another member of the community to the authorities.
Non-Jewish.
A rat.
Exactly.
It's a rat.
Exactly. A rat.
In mob terms.
Yes.
Yes.
So he tore his windpipe. Now, okay. Karei Rav Vilavei. Rav quoted a verse from the book of Isaiah, chapter 51. B'nai chulfu shachvu berosh kol chutzot keto michmar. He quoted a verse from the prophet, from Isaiah. He says, thy sons have fainted, they lie at the heads of all the streets as a wild bull in a net. Some translate also an antelope. Just as when a wild bull falls into a net, no one has mercy upon it, so with the property of an Israelite, as soon as it falls into the hands of the heathen oppressors, no mercy is exercised towards it. In other words, this guy has caused this man's property, or would have caused this man's property to fall in the hands of the heathen oppressors, of the Persian government, and the Persian government would have had no compassion upon this Jewish person and his property. Okay, so now Rav is justifying this murder, right? So now he says, Amar le Rav. Rav said to him, Amar le Rav, Kahana, Ad ha'idna havu parsai de la kapdei shfichut damim. והשתאי כיוונאי דקפטו השפיכות דמים ואמרי מרדין מרדין. Rav said to his student Kahana, until now the Greeks, who did not take much notice of bloodshed, were here, and now the Persians, who are particular regarding bloodshed, are here, and they will certainly say murder, murder. What's going on here is that there was a transition around, according to the scholars, around the year 224, 225, 226, around that time, there was a shift of dynasties in Persia. There was a dynasty called the Parthians, who apparently, according to this text, gave greater autonomy to the communities in order to be able to handle, to judge, and to sort of, they gave legal autonomy to the different communities around the country. Then came, after the Parthians, the Sassanids. It's a different dynasty that were more centralized and wanted more power, and they wanted to control what was going on in the different communities. So what the text is saying is there's been a transition. Rav says there's been a transition in the government here. And the present government is much more concerned about murder cases. They don't just leave it up to the local communities. They are going to fall on you, and they are going to call you a murderer, and they're going to put you in jail, and probably they're going to kill you. They're going to, they're going to judge you as in a capital case, and you're going to be put to death. So, arise therefore, kum sak le'aray Israel, go to the land of Israel, but take it upon yourself that you will not point out any difficulty to Rabbi Yochanan for the next 7 years. What's going on here? Go to Israel and go to the greatest academy in the land of Israel. Now go and take refuge in Israel, okay? Start making the journey. You will be safe in the land of Israel because the authorities won't be able to reach you there. And go to the academy of the greatest teacher of the day in Eretz Israel, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan lived in Tiberias. There was a big academy in Tiberias. The Galilee was an area of great activity in terms of yeshivot, of batei midrash. There were great scholars in the whole area of the Galilee, and there was this big academy in Tiberias. Rabbi Yochanan was a genius. He also happened to be, according to the Talmud, a very beautiful man, the most beautiful man that lived in those days. And he also was pretty narcissistic. There are many stories about him. He loved himself. He loved his demeanor, and he loved his mind. And he was this great teacher, the head of this academy. So Rav says to his student Rav Kana, go there. But once you get there, for 7 years, you can't raise questions to Rabbi Yochanan's teaching. Do you know what that is about? The whole methodology of the Beit Midrash of study is the rabbis did not lecture. I mean, they lectured, but then they opened themselves to challenges, to questions, kushiyot. You know the word kushiyah, which means question in Hebrew. It's hard. Means kashe means hard. To hard questioning, to challenges, to having their arguments demolished by their students. And then they would bring a counter argument, and the student would bring a counter argument, all with biblical proofs. And this is how Jewish law was decided, through this type of argumentation, okay, of debate. And so for a scholar to be part of a class, for a student to be part of a class in the Beit Midrash, this is how the Beit Midrash works. The great rabbi brings up an argument, and the students knock it down with biblical proofs. And then the teacher has to have a response to the student. So in order to be in a class, if you're a bright student, and if you're in a class, and you have to accept this obligation to be silent, it's the greatest punishment. So some read this as Rav is saying to him, you are escaping. We don't want to give you into the hands of the Persian authorities, but you've committed a murder. And so the punishment is now go there and shut up for 7 years. Huge. It's the greatest exile. So now he takes the journey. Okay, he gets on the train, packs his bags, he gets on the train, and he gets to Eretz Israel. He gets to Tiberias. Okay? Okay. Azil ashkechei l'resh lakish deyativ v'kam esayem metifta deyomar Rabbanan. So when he arrived, he found Resh Lakish sitting and going over the lecture of the day with the rabbis. Okay, who is Resh Lakish? Anybody know? Resh Lakish is a great scholar who had a past as a thief, as some sort of a criminal. He was the hand of a gang of bandits. And Rabbi Yochanan brought him into the study of Torah, and he became a great scholar. In the end, it's a very tragic story. It's in the Talmud, in the Masechet Bava Metzia. There's a very tragic story where they become codependents in their study, in this type of interaction of challenging each other. And what is it called? One-upmanship? One-upmanship? So in the end, they end up by hurting each other terribly. It's a very, very tragic story. But Resh Lakish is Rabbi Yochanan's partner. In this case, he appears here in the role of some sort of a teaching assistant. Rabbi Yochanan taught a lesson that day, and Resh Lakish now is reviewing it. It's something very wonderful about the model of study that is going on here. The teacher teaches a class, and then the students, without the teacher, with a teaching assistant, review the lesson. And probably they also prepare the next lesson for the next day, so that when they come to class, they really have already they have some immersion in the material of the previous lesson and the following lesson. So now he's reviewing, Resh Lakish is reviewing with the students the lesson of the day. And Kahana arrives with his suitcases. Okay, so he arrives into the yeshiva, he opens the door, the Beit Midrash, there's a classroom there, and Resh Lakish is going over the lesson. So he thereupon said to them, Amar lehu, Resh Lakish Eicha. He thereupon said to them, where is Resh Lakish? Didn't he know who Resh Lakish was? No. How come? That's right. He had just arrived. There was no Facebook in those days. He had never seen a picture of Resh Lakish. He comes into a classroom and he sees somebody going over the lesson. He doesn't know it's Resh Lakish, but he knew about him. Right. You see, people went back and forth. People knew about the great teachers. You know about the great teachers of Eretz Israel if you're in Babylon, because people go back and forth. Oh, the famous Rabbi Yochanan, the famous Resh Lakish. So he knew about him, but he had never met him. So he asked, where is he? Amrule amai, they said, why? So he says, Amar lehu, he says to them, he replied, Hai kushya v'hai kushya v'hai peruka v'hai peruka. He replied, this point in the lecture is difficult and that point is difficult, but this could be given as an answer and that could be given as an answer. He's already
making waves.
He can't talk to Rabbi Yochanan about this. He can't talk about Rabbi Yochanan about this. You're right, David. But he can talk to Resh Lakish about it. He heard the review of the lecture. And Resh Lakish, whom he didn't know, Rav Kahana didn't know it was Resh Lakish, was going over the lecture saying, Rabbi Yochanan said this and that. So now he wants to argue. So he argues to Resh Lakish. Okay? He brings up all sorts of questions and issues, challenges. Okay, so now, אמרו לרש לקיש, אזל רש לקיש, אמר לרבי יוחנן, ארי עלה מבבל, לעיין מר במתפתא דלמחר. When they mentioned this to Resh Lakish went and said to Rabbi Yochanan, now be careful, a lion has come up from Babylon. A lion in Talmudic terminology means somebody who's very sharp, really very, very sharp, a lion. And you can see already the choice of metaphor. What is a lion? A lion will destroy you, right? A lion is will tear you apart. A lion has come up from Babylon. See you can see already the violence. The Beit Midrash is a wonderful place of study and growth and learning and challenge, intellectual and so on. At the same time, many stories depict how the Beit Midrash can be a very cruel place where people tear each other apart mercilessly. And so you can see the violence here. A lion has come up from Babylon. Let the master therefore look very carefully into tomorrow's lecture. You're going to have somebody, what he didn't know, what is it, what didn't he know?
He's not going to be challenged.
That Rav Kahana could not open his mouth. Okay, but Resh Lakish doesn't know that. So he says, look, tomorrow you're going to have this guy in your classroom. You're the master, but you better prepare your class very carefully because he's going to ask you a lot of questions. Okay. Lemachar, odvu bedara Kamma kamei Rabbi Yochanan. The next day, Rav Kahana was seated on the first row. They sat him. He was not seated by himself. They sat him. Was seated means he was made to sit in the first row. The Beit Midrash has several rows. Some say had 7 rows. And the way it was organized, and this is interesting, there's some studies that have been made about how the Beit Midrash was organized. The teachers sat, or the teachers, sometimes was more than one, sat on chairs. And the students sat on the floor, or on cushions on the floor. And so the teacher was always higher, the students were always lower. Something to be said about the fact that Torah flows down from a higher place to a lower place, right? And the students sat in rows. The brightest students sat always they were always seated in the front rows. And successively until the last row were the students who were the least capable of challenging the teacher, bringing up all these reflections and questions and so on. Very interesting about the educational system. Okay, so the first row was reserved for the brightest students. Now there's a very famous story of Moshe who goes to the academy of Rabbi Akiva, and he is in the last row. Moshe is in the last row, and he doesn't understand a word of what's going on in the classroom of Rabbi Akiva, so he's in the very back. Okay, now here he's in the first row. Okay, so Amar Shmatata Velakshe. Rabbi Yochanan taught one argument, one statement, Velakshe, and Rav Kahana did not challenge, did not bring any difficulty, did not raise any questions. Anchate achorei sheva darei at deodvei bedara batra. So the lesson progressed, and as Rav Kahana was silent, they kept moving him back one row until he reached the last row. Okay? So he was Bedara Batra. He was in the last row because now they think he's incapable of raising up any challenges. Okay? Amar le Rav Yochanan le Reish Lakish, or le Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Ari she'amrat nasa shual. This lion that you warned me about yesterday is not really a lion. He's more like a fox. You know, he's not that sharp, and his teeth are not that sharp. He's not a threat to me. Amar yehi ra'ava dehane sheva darei lehavu chiluf sheva shenin de amar li Rav. So Rav Kahana thinks to himself, let it be that these 7 rows that I was moved back, 7 rows, let them count for the 7 years that Rav told me I should be silent.
All bets are off.
All bets are off now. Now the reader is prepared. You don't know the rest of the story. So now the reader is prepared. There's going to be some action here. But he makes this own argument with himself, this agreement with himself, this vow. Why did he make this vow? Why did he say these 7 rows, let them count for 7 years? What did he anticipate that the 7 years were going to be like? Hell. Hell. The 7 years were going to be hell. Why would the 7 years be like hell?
Because he couldn't contradict. He couldn't bring up an issue. He had to be mute.
Absolutely. So he was in hell because the whole point of being in the Beit Midrash, the whole action is in being able to argue. And he couldn't argue. He was prohibited from arguing from his teacher for the murder that he had committed. So he was in hell. Not only was he in hell, in terms of his own personal, being in a jail, but
he was humiliated too.
Exactly. Now he was humiliated. The others thought this guy is incapable, because he was silent. So he's an idiot. I mean, this guy who came from Babylonia, is that what? Personally, he's an idiot, and he represents a community of idiots, basically. So he is now totally humiliated, both for himself and for his teacher. I mean, people know that he's the student of Rav. So imagine, you know, the reputation of his teacher, not only his own reputation, the reputation of his teacher now is on the floor. Right? So the guy says, may this humiliation and this suffering serve for 7 years. Let it count as 7 years. So now, okay, now he's going to begin to open his mouth. Okay. Kamma kar'ei, he stood up on his feet, on his legs. Amar le, nahadar mar beresha. Please, may the teacher, the master, go back to the beginning of the lesson. Go back to the beginning of the... Now I'm going to start ask questions. Amar shematata ve'akshei. Rabbi Yochanan went to the beginning of the teaching, and now Rav Kahana started challenging. Okmei bedara Kamma. They brought him back to the first row. Now they see that he has quite an ability to challenge and to argue. So they bring him back to the first row. Okay, progressively. They moved him as the lesson progressed. Just as he had been moved back, now you can see it in reverse. Amar shematata ve'akshei. He continued the lesson and he continued challenging. Rabbi Yochanan, avayativ asheva bastarkei. Rabbi Yochanan was sitting on 7 cushions. He was high. He was not on a chair. He was on 7 cushions, piled up. He was higher. Shalfei lei chada bastarka mitutei. They removed. Can you imagine? They removed 1 cushion from underneath him. Amar shmatata ve'akshei lei. He continued teaching, and this guy Rav Kahana kept challenging him. At shalfei lei kulhu bastarki mitutei. At yativa lar'a. Until they removed all the cushions from under Rabbi Yochanan, the great teacher, and now he's sitting on the ground, on the same level as he stood. Like, this is, talk about humiliation. So he moved him 7 rows back, then brought him 7 rows front, and now Rabbi Yochanan is now 7 cushions lower until he sits on the ground. You see he pays him back, basically. Destroys him. Huh?
Who decides?
The consensus is that if you lose an argument, so Rav Kahana would argue, and Rabbi Yochanan wouldn't have a better answer. He couldn't defend his argument. He didn't have a counter argument that was strong enough. Couldn't find the verses. He couldn't put them together. He couldn't reason his way.
Didn't have a proof text.
He couldn't have a proof text, and therefore he could not face the challenge of Rav Kahana. So you see what's going on here, right? Okay. And this terrible, these people take these things very personally. There's terrible humiliation here. Okay, so I'm saying, look at the model, the educational model, look at the model of the Beit Midrash. Of course, that's not what happens at the Hartman Institute. That's not how it's organized. But this is where it comes. This is where the tradition comes from. You see what adjustments have to be made for the teacher to be able to teach, the students to be able to argue, but without this type of animosity or humiliation. There's something here. If you read many of these stories, you'll see there's something here much greater than for the sake of Torah itself. Of course, the arguments are for the sake of Torah, and this is how Torah grows and expands. But there's something here. The personal is very caught up in this, personal prestige, and people get carried away. There's tremendous jealousies, and many of the stories about the Beit Midrash really bring out that. The question, a very interesting question, is why the Talmud, who represents that tradition, it's the same rabbis basically who collect all these stories. Why do they collect stories about themselves that make them look in such a negative light? So now Rabbi Yochanan is sitting on the ground, completely humiliated. Rav Kahana now is vindicated, right? Rabbi Yochanan gavra sava hava umsarche gevinei. Rabbi Yochanan was at this point a very elderly man. And he his eyebrows, I'm looking for the translation here, how it's translated. Eyelashes. Some say it's the eyebrows, some say it's the eyelashes, were too heavy. Either were covering his eyes or his eyelashes were too heavy, he couldn't open his eyes. Of course, it's some sort of a literary exaggeration. And he couldn't see. So he says, Amar leho dalu leinai v'achzei. Lift my eyes so I can see him. I want to see this guy who's sitting in the first row, who's challenging me. I haven't seen his face because I can't see. Dalu lei b'machalta de kaspa. They brought some silver, a stick or a what does it say here? Pincers. And they lifted his eyes, or his eyelids, okay, or his eyebrows, whatever it is. They lifted so that he could see. Chaza de parte sfatute, or svavute. He saw that his lips were parted. The lips were parted. Savar achvech kamechayech bei. He thought that he was laughing at him. Because his lips were parted, he thought he had some sort of defect. He had some malformation or something. He was known for that, actually. And Rabbi Yochanan thought that he was laughing at him. Chalash datei v'nach nafshei. He became humiliated that he thought that Rav Kahana was laughing at him. He terribly mortified, because now remember, he started on 7 cushions, the great teacher. Now he's sitting on the floor. He thinks the other guy is laughing at him. A student is laughing at him. This new arrival from Babylonia is laughing at him. I mean, his whole self-esteem is in the ground. Now he's chalash da'ateh. He became very, very depressed. And because he became very depressed, nach nafshei, Rav Kahana died. In a sense, if one speaks theologically, God could not take his sense of humiliation. He had to remove Rav Kahana from the world, so to speak. Rav Kahana, it was so heavy. It was so deep. His sense of humiliation was so deep that Rav Kahana died. There are a number of stories where the same mechanism happens. Somebody is deeply humiliated and somebody else dies. Story, I don't know if you know the story of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer about the oven of Achnai. You know that story? Right. And the oven of Achnai, Rabbi Eliezer feels so humiliated, so depressed, so sad that his brother-in-law, Rabban Gamliel, dies. There are a number of stories like this. Actually, the story where that was quoted before, that Ruth Calderon taught in the Knesset, the story of Rav Rechumi, okay? His wife feels so sad, so depressed that he dies because she sheds a tear. She cries because he doesn't come home. And I don't know if you know the story. There are a number of stories like this where the pain, the spiritual, emotional pain is so intense on the part of a person that the person who's causing that grief has to die. So here Rav Kahana, who's causing that grief, dies. Lemachar, Amar lehu Rabbi Yochanan leRabbanan, Chazitu lebavla'a echa avid. The next day, Rabbi Yochanan said to his students, to the rabbis in the academy, in the Beit Midrash, did you see how that Babylonian, how he acted? That Babylonian, okay? You can see the rivalry here also. He's humiliated as a Torah teacher in Eretz Israel. Now this guy from Babylonia came. Did you see how he acted? He was laughing at me. Amru le darchei hachi. They said to him, that's the way he looks. He wasn't laughing at you. He has a problem. He has a defect. So al legabe me'arta. So now Rabbi Yochanan understands that the guy wasn't laughing at him, and that he was sort of killed for no reason. And so he goes to Me'arta, he goes to the cave where Rav Kahana is buried. Chaza dehava hadra le'achna. He saw that there was a snake coiled around the cave. You see the motif of the snake appears many times. Actually, in the oven of Achnai, Tarnur Shel Achnai, also appears this snake that is coiled. It appears in many stories. The snake is coiled with the tail in its mouth. It's a motif that appears in other literatures as well, in other cultures. The snake has the tail in its mouth, and if it doesn't open its mouth and doesn't release, you can't open whatever is closed. So the snake now is protecting this cave from being open. Amar le, achna, achna, petach pumech v'yikanes harav etzel talmid. Now, Rabbi Yochanan wants to try to see, you know the story of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves. Okay, so right. So now he has to find a formula to open this cave. So he says, open your mouth and may the teacher enter into the place where his student is found. V'la patach, and the snake doesn't open the mouth. Ikanes chaver etzel chaver. May a colleague enter into the colleague. V'lo patach. The snake didn't open its mouth. Ikanes talmid etzel arav. May the student enter into the teacher. Patach le. Now the snake opens its mouth, and Rabbi Yochanan enters into the cave, where the burial cave. Be'ar rachmei ve'okmei. Now Rabbi Yochanan asks for mercy, and Rav Kahana comes back to life, revives. Amar le, ihav al yedana, de darchei de mar hachi, lach al shadate. If I had known that this is your way, that this is you have a physical defect or some deformation or something in your lips, I wouldn't have felt aggrieved or humiliated or insulted. Actually, the word probably is insult. I wouldn't have felt insulted. I wouldn't have thought that you were laughing at me, and you wouldn't have died. I'm sorry. Ashta leitei mar behadan. Now, come with us. Come back to the Beit Midrash. Amar le, im matzit lemibai rachmei detu la shachivna azilna. If you can promise me, if you can ask for mercy that I will not die again, then I'll come with you. I don't want you to kill me again. So if you're not going to be offended, if the next time you're offended or humiliated or aggrieved, you're not going to kill me. You're not going to become so aggrieved and depressed and humiliated that I'm going to die again, then I'll come with you. Otherwise, I'm not going to come with you. So he responded, Ohoil v'chalif sha'ata chalif. He says, look, what happened. It happened once. What happened. I can't make it happen again. It's not going to happen again. It happened once. Tairei okmei shailei kol sefika dehavalei ufshatinhu nihalei. So he brought him up to life. He brought him with him to the Beit Midrash. He asked him all his questions, all his doubts, and Rav Kahana would solve all his problems, all his questions. Rav Kahana would solve all the issues that he had. Every time that he found himself in a dead end with regard to his learning, Rav Kahana would solve the question for you. Look, there's a verse here that explains it. There's a verse here that. So he would open the learning for him. So now comes the punchline. Hainu de Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said. This is the statement that he says. Dilkon amri You say it's ours, or it's yours. You say it's yours. Dilhon hi, it's theirs. We're referring to
Israel.
To the Torah, to learning. You think the Torah is ours? You think that the greatest Torah, you think that Torah comes out of here? It doesn't come out of here. Comes from Bavel. The greatest Torah comes from Bavel. Now, the text has Rabbi Yochanan admit this. Now, the text was put together where? Of course. So the text is a Babylonian text that puts in the mouth of Rabbi Yochanan, the greatest teacher of the day in Eretz Israel, the statement, the Torah of Babel is greatest. Okay, well, of course, now the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, is elevating itself and elevating its Torah vis-a-vis the Torah of Eretz Israel. The truth is that there is a Palestinian Talmud, so-called Palestinian Talmud, Talmud Yerushalmi, the Talmud of Eretz Israel. And there's a Talmud Bavli, and Talmud Bavli is more intricate, more sophisticated, more complex, more textured, more extensive than the Talmud Yerushalmi. There are differences in methodology, there are differences in the approach. The community of Bavel probably was also a more comfortable community, a more empowered community. The community in Eretz Israel was a smaller community. Eventually they became also persecuted, and there are all sorts of historical reasons. But that's the story. So now the question is, what do we do with it? Do we have a rivalry? Like Michael Warsaw said before in the session, there should be a rivalry. We should be competing. Who has the greatest story? Because that will push both communities. And by the way, we're not the only two communities. There are Jews in England and Jews in France and Jews in South America and so on. There's a Torah from those places too. So should we be in competition? I think we've come to the point that we have. There is some recognition that there's a Torah of the diaspora or the American Jewish experience, and there's a Torah of Israel. The two Torahs have obviously there's a lot of it that is overlap, that is common, and there are things that are particular to each community. We are a minority community in a majority population that is not Jewish. In Israel, it's the reverse. There must be something. There's something about being home, and something about being home but not being entirely home. And in other aspects, people in Israel are home, and in some aspects they're not home. Are they the same places where we feel at home and we don't feel at home? All these questions. So these Torahs, I believe, in some way compete and in some way complement each other. And I think there's some, I think we're working towards that. We're moving towards that place of acknowledging where we address the same issues, and where we address issues that are complementary. Within the American Jewish community and within the Israeli Jewish community, I think that there are learned and learning communities, and there are scholars, and there are people who are engaged, and people who are growing in Torah. And the question is, how do they view each other, and how do they interact with each other in the field of ideas and Torah and halakha and all these questions? Do we clash? Do we support each other? Do we walk together? Do we try to outdo the other? I mean, where are we?
I don't think there's one Jewish community. This is the problem.
Right.
So let's say the thing with conversion, for example. I assume the Orthodox community here, or the modern Orthodox, probably more or less agrees with the Israeli government, position that it should be, although there's some concern now because they're not recognizing the conversion of modern Orthodox rabbis. And then you have Reform, and especially where the idea that it's not necessarily metrolinear, it could be from the fall.
Right.
Their concerns are different. Even the thing with the women of the wall, not every American, it depends what community.
I think the question is it Lishma or not Lishma? If it's Lishma, I don't care.
Translate for people who don't know.
If it's for the sake of the Torah, I don't care if there's rivalry between Israel and Diaspora.
The conclusion is a competition of ideas is almost by definition always good. And so if we can develop our ideas and thoughts on Torah here in America, and the entire diaspora, we're the leader of the diaspora, there are other smaller ones, but it comes from basically here. And Israel continues their development of their ideas and thoughts, and we do it cooperatively and respectfully, not always, because we have certain elements that don't, but by and large. And it doesn't have to be the entire Jewish world that does that. It's the leaders, the thinkers. That's the Hartman Institute. That was David's teaching, where I'll teach the elitists and then let them pass the word down through the community. So the idea of having both communities working on these ideas, I think, is strong and healthy, and eventually will put us in a better position than if we were
Amen.
not doing that.
Amen. Amen.
Great end.
Amen. Great end. Great end. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.